It's a big deal to be in the top 100 in the NFL, and the Chiefs have placed 5 in this year's list. Who stands out and who got missed today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, folks. Hope you're having a great one. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make another Locked On show your next listen right after this. Go to RGR Football. Go to NFL 33. You can find all kinds of information both around the league and on these Chiefs. There you can go to KC Chiefs Corner. That Substack gets subscribed over there as well as NFL 33. Hit Rogue APC. That's where all of my athleticism metrics are at. And the new class is coming here as we approach the Combine later in the week. We'll have more for you on that coming up. Today, we're going to go through tackles on the free agent market. Who do we like? What do we think right now? That's coming up later. DJ Humphries says he wants a chance to remain a Chief. Does that help them or not? We're going to go through the DJ Humphries decision coming up next, but we start with 5 Chiefs in the top 100. I personally feel like that's probably missing a couple, but we talked about Joe Thuney yesterday. He comes onto the list as the lowest of the Chiefs at number 46 overall. I think that's low for a guy that did what he did.
46 is the lowest of all 5.
Yes.
That says a lot.
It does.
Why don't we go ahead and say who didn't make the list? Because I do think that
get to that later, but okay.
Okay, well.
The glaring omission.
I think that's
glaring omission is one Travis Kelce. So it's do you think that he should be considered top 100 after the season that he just put up?
It's tough. I don't know that I would say he's top 100. I think he played well, but there are some really good tight ends out there right now in the league, and he didn't have a great season. So does it shock me he didn't make the top 100? No. I'm surprised that I will say this. I'm probably more surprised that Thuney is the lowest Chief at 46 than I am that Travis Kelce didn't make the list at all.
Okay, fair enough. that is a very good point.
I think that at 5.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're saying one of the 2 best rosters in this league only produced 5 of the top 100 players. That's a little bit off kilter for me. Travis Kelce would obviously be one that I think should have been considered. Clearly, we will move to a couple others here coming up in a little bit, but. Next on the list is who I consider QB1. Patrick Mahomes comes in at number 39. You could argue whether Josh should be the MVP or Lamar or whatever, but 39? Really?
Good. Petty Mahomes. That's all I got to say. I continue giving him bulletin board material. I mean, I said on yesterday's show, and I'll say this about what I said on yesterday's show. I said yesterday that I almost wish the Chiefs would have lost the AFC Championship game because then they would have gotten the 2-week break.
Yeah.
But the reality is Petty Mahomes is going to come back even more petty after everything that's being said about him for his performance in the Super Bowl. And they're just going to give him more and more bulletin board material. Go right ahead. It's fine with me. Don't care.
Okay. All right. As long as you're happy.
I'm not going to say I'm happy, but I still wouldn't. Would I take any other QB over Patrick Mahomes in the NFL? No, I'll put it that way. But the reality is he didn't have a good season last year. He played really poorly to start the season with all the turnovers, and a lot of those turnovers were on him. So I get it to an extent. That's kind of what we're looking at is the whole breadth of the way he played. I thought he played better down the stretch, but it's taking the entire season into account.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to argue about the placement because you're right. There's a giant leap from that point forward. The next player for the Chiefs comes in at number 16, and that's Trent McDuffie. And I think it's a little late to be recognizing him, but I'm glad that it's happening. I think he certainly should be in the top 20 players. That doesn't surprise me at all. I think he had yet another really, really good season, and now he's starting to produce turnovers. The one thing that maybe you could say he wasn't able to do to this point. So I think it's warranted. I think it's justified and good for him.
Absolutely, and I think that's impressive. Him coming in at 16 is congratulations. That's a great year for him, and I think he deserved it. I think that he probably deserved to be higher last year, and being 16 says a lot. I'd be curious to know how many corners are above him. I can't imagine that there are that many considering he's at 16. So at that point, obviously you're saying that he's one of the best corners in the NFL, and hard to argue that.
Yeah, it is pretty straightforward, and
But
it's
that,
something that they've come to rely on. Pat Surtain is ahead of him. Okay, I have no problem with that. Who
Yeah.
else? As I look at the list here, it is very, very straightforward. A lot of quarterbacks above him. It is only Pat Surtain that is above him on this list. And kudos to Derek Stingley, had a great year. Cooper DeJean, obviously a phenom in his first year. Marlon Humphrey had a nice resurgence, but there's really no one that I feel you can say other than Pat Surtain that's really in the running.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that is really big to me here is he's finally looked at as one of the best corners in the NFL, which I think he's been for the past couple of seasons. But the other part of it is that you're still talking about at 16, that's 3 players. Kansas City still has 2 more that are above Trent McDuffie.
Yeah, 2 in the top 10, back to back, with Chris Jones coming in at number 8 and Creed Humphrey coming in at number 7. A lot of talk about the lines for this team all offseason. It's just going to be the reality. But to have 2 anchors like this that are considered top 10 talents in this league, no matter what the age, and I know Chris is getting up there and folks are starting to get concerned about it, but he is still able to be productive and can anchor this unit going forward. I think it's legitimate. There's no better defensive tackle, in my opinion, overall than Chris Jones, especially if you want versatility and want to be able to go out to the edge. So you might be able to argue he was a little overlooked. Myles Garrett had a great season too. He's the only defensive lineman above him, so I can't really argue.
Yeah, we've already talked about Myles Garrett possibly being in Kansas City. So there you go. That would be fun. The reality, though, is when you look at this, if you're a Chiefs fan, you have to be ecstatic about it, because what that tells you is that even at his age, Chris Jones is still producing. He is still worth the contract that you gave him. And that is a big deal, because you're going to have to look at, we talked about Thuney's number. Chris Jones's number is prohibitive as well for the Chiefs. And that's definitely something that they're going to have to address. And him not having a good season in 2024 would have been something that would have caused them some, a conundrum of what are they going to do, because right now his cap number is just under 35 million. There's no way he plays at a cap number of 35 million, in my opinion, in 2025. And him having a great year makes you think that that's not going to be an issue. They can spread it out and they can, move some of the money forward.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I hope that they do. And Creed Humphrey, there's no argument. Like, he already set the market for the center group. The only offensive lineman who was graded out above him in this particular exercise is Jordan Mailata, who had another incredible season. So I think that this is legitimate. Centers are always going to be, I think, a tick down below the best tackles in the league. They're always going to be respected because the tackles get isolated so much more. But Creed Humphries is a real deal.
Well, and to see him at 7 is kind of surprising. I mean, that's a lot higher than I would expect to see as centers. So
yeah,
the reality is I think that's a great deal for Creed Humphrey. And the best part is like you said, he already set the market for centers. Like, he is already paid. They know he's the best center in the NFL, and the league is saying he's the best center in the NFL. And Jordan Mailata, I just want to say, can Kansas City find something like that, please? Like, go out there and find something, just kind of out there somewhere, as opposed to
Polynesian Bowl happens every year. There's players out there. Go find the diamonds in the rough. They are there. And I know Creed Humphrey is a top 7 player. DJ Humphries, excuse my language, a couple of minutes ago there, folks, is a guy that wants a second chance. Should he get that? That's coming up next. This is a fun one because this is a complete and utter what if. Unless you're somebody that grows the grass at the practice field or is inside the building itself, we are going to talk hypotheticals here, because that's the only thing we have to talk about. And this is really the last piece that you have to get in focus before we start talking about free agency for the offensive tackles. Make sure, if you want that much more, go to KC Chiefs Corner, go to NFL 33, go to RGR Football. We got tons of content for you. It all starts here on the Locked On Show, but it does echo through the rest of the content that we put out. DJ Humphries, I had hopes. I still feel, had he been physically able, they should have played him down the stretch in the playoffs, at least the championship game in the Super Bowl. Didn't happen. He has been adamant, at least on social media and to those that are listening, that he wants a chance to actually prove that he can still play and play for this team. So my question to you, given his contract that he was on this year, it was a single year, right? It was at 5 flat. Is that in the range that you would want to pay him if you brought him back?
Man, that's tough because he didn't do anything for you this year, and I'm trying to look up his contract. So he got a contract of exactly $5 million. And if you want to look at over the cap's valuation, they are saying his value was $1 million. Base salary 4.5, per sign-on bonus of 500,000, per game roster bonus of 500,000. He had a cap number of $2.5 million. If he wants to come back and play for that type of contract, if they want to give him $10 million with like a bunch of incentives, like 5 or 6 or 7 million in incentives, and he wants to play and he wants to be in Kansas City, then sure, I'll do it. On the deal he got, I probably would do it, but much past that, I don't know. They didn't seem to think. And here's the thing that's really key on all of it. He's coming back from an ACL, so obviously he wasn't going to be 100%. That's reality. But the question is does the team think he can get back to 100% by the time that the season kicks off in September, or worst case, like October and November? Like, because even if he's not 100%, but he's practicing and he's, sitting there and he's your left tackle for the entirety of training camp and in September and October, if he's not 100%, but they think he can get there by, the middle of the season next year, then I think that you feel good about doing that deal. Because the reality is that if you don't do that, you're either going to have to trade everything you have to try to go up and get a tackle, which is an option, and maybe a smarter option because but you have to make sure you hit. That's the problem. They drafted a left tackle or who they thought could be a left tackle last year in Suamatia, and this move, bringing Humphries back actually wouldn't say that they're done with Suamatia. But drafting another tackle would absolutely say they're done with Suamatia at left tackle at least. So what are they going to do? And I know we're talking about Humphries specifically, but it all plays into, is that what they do? Do they want to give him a deal? Because if they don't, you have to draft somebody. If you give him a deal, he's probably one of the only free agents that you could really afford.
And that's the thing, is it's affordability and now a little bit of familiarity. And if you believed in him before and he just wasn't physically able, and we still don't have the answer, obviously re-injured the hamstring. I think that's directly correlated to the ACL. We all know, especially for 300-pounders, the second year back from an ACL is always better because you have to reestablish not only the neurology to fire those muscles, but the muscle strength to stabilize the joint that you just had repaired. It's different than playing as a wide receiver or somebody who just had an ACL repair. We've seen a lot of safeties go through that recently on this roster. So maybe they have some faith. And if they do, then I could see giving it a chance at a low-end deal like this, maybe even lower than what you just paid him, because honestly, it was probably more than it was worth. But he is 32 years old. So there's always that factor as well.
But you have Trent Williams, who played close to 40 and played at a high level. And I understand he's not Trent Williams. He was never Trent Williams. I get that. And age is going to be harder on him, maybe even quicker on him. But you have to figure out the left tackle position. And is this a better option than going into the draft and drafting somebody and potentially missing again? The other reality here is that they could bring him back, and they could bring him back on a short or on a low dollar deal and still try to draft somebody. Mm-hmm. You have to fix this position. You cannot continue. Yeah. Let me rephrase. Let me change the way I'm going to say this. You have to fix the position if you're going to continue to play offense the way you play offense. If they want to change how they play offense and maybe give the tackle some help, then you don't necessarily have to fix the position this offseason. You want to, but you don't have to. If you're going to put your guy on an island every single snap like the Chiefs tend to do, you have to fix this position.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I think it's job number one. I don't think there's anything else. So in my book, you throw everything at it. Draft, free agency, everything.
1, 2, and 3. I think it's top 3 jobs, honestly.
And fair enough.
I know that people are going to say that's nuts, but no. If you don't get this position fixed, it hurts your entire line. Like, you cannot. It hurts the entire line if you don't fix the left tackle position. And the problem is you don't know if DJ Humphries is going to be enough to fix the tackle position.
That's true. And that's why it takes more than just one quote unquote answer. Some of it might be in free agency as well that isn't DJ Humphries. Who looks good out there and who doesn't? Coming up next. If you want more, make sure you check out another Locked On show with your next listen. We very much appreciate it. You locos, we love you guys. We do it for you every day, and we appreciate you over on the text line at 816-357-8781. Tackles are tough, and we know this is the second time a Super Bowl loss has come because directly of the pass protection. Got to get that figured out. It's not the greatest free agent class, at least as it stands right now. I know there's rumor about a couple of guys getting let go. We'll deal with that when we deal with that. But just looking at this group now, we're going to play hot or cold about a couple of guys. We talked briefly about Jedrick Wills. He is a Brett Veach type, former first-round pick coming off of the rehab pile, you might say, 26 years old. I am all for if they want to go give him a contract similar to DJ's level last year, maybe even a little bit elevated from that because you got to go get him. I think that's worth the investment to find out. I would do that. Are you hot or cold?
If they can give him the type of contract they gave Humphries, I would be hot on that, because I don't think the reality is you have to figure out that position, like I said, but you also have a issue with salary cap unless you're going to make some major changes. And maybe that's something we ought to look at maybe later this week, let's do a deep dive on maybe Thursday or Friday and say, if the Chiefs decide they want to go crazy, how much cap space can they create?
Always a fun exercise. The crazy cap show. I think that should definitely come up. I don't know. Anybody stand out to you?
I mean, we kind of already talked about, some of the tackles that I would have looked at. Wills, again, I'm okay with it. But when you start looking at the left tackle position, it's hard. How are you going to pay these guys? That's really what the question comes down to. Cam Robinson is the guy that is the top of the list. I don't think he played great for the Vikings. He had an APY of $17.5 million. Can't imagine that he's going to be getting an APY anywhere south of maybe $14 to $15 million. I don't think that I'm paying him at that rate.
That's absolutely fair. I would be cold on him at that rate as well. And honestly, at this point, I think Ronnie Stanley's probably a better option at a year older at half the money. So I would be cold on Cam Robinson, probably, period. But
that's it. That's interesting. Ronnie Stanley at more money. Okay, well.
No, Ronnie Stanley at half the money.
Oh, half the money. I'm sorry. I thought you said more money for a second. And yeah, I don't know that I would go a lot more money on Stanley considering the injury history, but that's another issue.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a significant one. The guy that stands out to me that I find intriguing, I don't think it'll break the bank. It'd be more than Humphries. It might be in the 8 to 10 mil range. I think that's probably legitimate. Rams had a pretty good season. Alaric Jackson played pretty well for them. Can he fit in this system? Is the thing. I've looked at some of the film. I know a couple other people around Chiefs Twitter have looked at some of the film. I have a slightly different opinion. I think the transition is a little bit harder, but I do think at the age, he's 27. I think that's one of the better options to expect that he can, because he's got the basics down. And if nothing else, I think he is another float to get Kingsley developed more. I'm treating Kingsley as this was a red shirt year for him. He should be an actual rookie next year. Eventually, maybe he changes position, but I still think there's a shot that he develops into your left tackle of the future.
He could, and be fair about it. And I'm not saying this to you, but to all the fans out there. He came in at 21 years old. Like, he really probably should have gone back for another season. And I'm not going to say that he would have been ready to start at left tackle with another season. But part of what I think slowed him down was just getting used to the entire NFL and getting used to the playbook, getting used to everything. Like, that is so important that he gets into that. So if he can figure that out in the offseason, maybe he isn't their starter this year. Maybe you get a plug and play guy like DJ Humphries or Alaric, like you're talking about. and Suamati is still your guy in 2026. I'd be okay with Larry Jackson if you can get him at a cheap deal, but again, that's the big thing. Are you going to be able to get him on a cheap deal? And the reality is when you look at this, for me, I've said this multiple times, I'll say it again, you have to fix the position, but the reality is you have to fix it, and you have to decide, okay, if you're going to go out and get a guy like a Larry Jackson, you're going to have to change the offense. You can't put him on a island every single snap. And while I understand that's what Reed wants to do, his inability, or his, not necessarily inability, but his decisions not to change cost them dearly in the Super Bowl. He could have made adjustments and chose not to. That's a big issue, and they got to get that addressed as well.
Yeah. There are others that could be patchwork as far as I'm concerned. Ben Barch. I did like him coming out. Hasn't developed into much. He's, again, 25, I think. Jackson Carman, another failed first rounder or early second rounder, I think. Again, could be a fit issue in where he's been in Miami. So maybe those are a couple of ones. Nobody that stands out or gets hot for me.
What about Andre Dillard? Another former first-round pick.
Yeah, that ship has sailed as far as I'm concerned. I would not pursue him.
Yeah, and that's really the problem is when you look at the free agency class, when you're talking about the tackle position, it is going to be almost impossible to find a left tackle, mainly because anybody that is worth keeping, teams are finding ways to pay for. Because while a lot of people don't talk about it, left tackle is still probably the number 2 position in football, although you could probably argue defensive end is getting there or really close.
Yeah, that's fair. There could always be somebody out of the blue. So if you had to look at a position change or anybody else that strikes your fancy, would you take a chance on Akeem Adeniji or somebody like that?
I mean, they could take chances, and Brett Veach has a lot more experience in looking at the roster, so I'm not going to guess. I'm not going to try to second guess who they're going to go out and get. The one thing I will say is that he usually zigs when people thinks he is going to zag. So how is that going to play into this season? How is that going to play into the offseason? Is he going to do something that people don't expect? I would guess so. We're looking at free agents. I'm not going to be shocked if they don't make a move and they don't make a trade for a tackle of some sort. I'm not going to even try to throw out a name because who knows who could be out there right now. It's too early. Like if this was 2 weeks from now, maybe you could start thinking you can throw out a name and maybe you get something done, or maybe even later than that. But I don't think that you're going to have, I think that when a trade is going to happen, it's either going to be in the next couple of weeks, right before free agency, or it's going to be right before the draft or during the draft. And it would not shock me to see Kansas City make a trade and trade away their first round pick and maybe their first third round pick and try to go get a tackle. Because if they can solve the problem that way, it's just like you're just drafting somebody.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's one guy that stands out to me that could be a position change. And that's because he's under the radar because of Ronnie Stanley. Patrick McCarry played left guard for the Baltimore Ravens most of this season. He played right tackle against the Chiefs. But when Ronnie Stanley missed time in 2023, who played left tackle for them and held his own? It was Patrick McCarry. So another guy that gives you the versatility that maybe this team really, really likes and could stand in and maybe look at trying to play tackle, especially if you feel you still have road ahead for Kingsley Suamati in particular.
Yeah, and again, if they can get him on a good deal, sure. But I don't think you can pay him. Like, you're not going to be able to go out and pay somebody $20 million a year unless you're going to get a top-of-the-line tackle. And so to me, that's really going to be the issue is if you're going to go out and pay somebody, it's going to have to be somebody that you know is going to be able to step in and be the left tackle for the next 3 or 4 years. But there's not really anybody out there that meets that criteria right now. Like there's lots of different guys out there that you could have for, somewhere between $5 and maybe $10, $12 million a year. But are they going to be a big upgrade from what you have now or what you could have in DJ Humphries? I don't know.
That's the big, big question. Now, obviously, the combine's going on later this weekend, et cetera, et cetera. There's plenty of tackles in that group. We'll start peppering in some of the draft talk next week after that. I do have my eye on two guys in particular for the Chiefs that could very much work out and let Kingsley either become a guard or become the right tackle. That's also a possibility. We'll talk about those scenarios coming up. Matt Derrick will join us tomorrow. Don't miss that. And we will get back with the cap extravaganza as well as deeper dives into the positions that the Chiefs needs. Make sure that you keep it here. Like, sub, hit that bell, become part of our regulars, the Locos, over at 816-357-8781. Check out NFL 33 and RGR Football. Thanks for being with us today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.